Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. On behalf of the entire Manage Engine 80 Solutions team involved with planning today's webinar, I just want to extend a warm welcome to all of you and to thank you for taking time off from your busy schedules for making it here today. So my name is Siddharth, or just Sid, if that's easier. And I'm from the IT Security Solutions team at Manage Engine, and I'm going to be your presenter for today's webinar. I'm also joined by Bala, who's our product expert, and he is available on the live chat. So in case you have any questions over the course of the webinar, you can reach out and either Bala or myself will answer your questions. I just want to make sure you have no issues with the webinar setup itself. I hope you can hear me loud and clear, and I hope you can see my shared screen. So you should be able to see my presentation that says everything you need to know about ransomware, right? So in case you have any difficulties with either the presentation with the shared screen or with my audio, do reach out to us on the live chat and we'll try to see if we can fix it. Right. So ransomware, that's what we're going to talk about today. That's the agenda for today's webinar. As you know, you all definitely know by now, ransomware is a type of malware that encrypts your data and it demands ransom for the decryption, right? It's almost like a Hollywood crime movie in the making, if you ask me, right? You have a ransom, you demand money, and you hold your data at hostage. So what exactly we're going to be doing today is not just look at things like textbook definitions, because I'm sure you can look these things up on the internet. But what we're trying to achieve today is sort of give some insights into how ransomware actually works and what you can do, actionable information that you can actually implement in your enterprises for detecting and defeating ransomware, right? So we're going to start off for a bit by looking at the history and the evolution of ransomware, and then try to understand the attack pattern, because these two things are really important in preparing yourself for the defense against ransomware, right? You obviously need some theoretical knowledge about the attack so that you can then identify things that you can improve with regards to security in your enterprise, right? We're also going to look at best practices to prevent ransomware. So we'll have a look at about 5 or 6 best practices, most of which are free, meaning you can immediately start doing this if you aren't already. You can immediately start doing these things in your enterprises starting today. So we're going to be looking at that. And one of the most important things that we're going to be looking at today is in achieving real-time incident detection and response, right? We are going to be looking at how we can actually detect ransomware in our environment and how we can automate response against ransomware, right? This is the key. And over the course of the webinar, you'll understand why having this incident detection and response is important. And I'm also going to show you how you can actually achieve this in your environment. And of course, we're going to be looking at recovering from an attack. And again, over the course of the webinar, you will know the importance of this, because not all attacks can be prevented. So we're also going to be looking at why you need backup and how exactly you can recover in case you do get hit by ransomware. Right. So this is the webinar agenda that we have set up for over the next 30 to 35 minutes, maybe 40 minutes at most. And what I also want to encourage all of you to do, we have a really good turnout today, and I want to encourage all of you to interact with us on the live chat, because I'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar, but Bala, he's here to answer any questions that you have over the course of the webinar itself. And any questions that you have, I can even share them to the rest of the audience for everyone's benefit as well. So make use of that, take advantage of this, and any questions you have, it would be great if you can shoot them out on the live chat and we'll try to answer them as soon as possible. Right. So the first thing that we're going to be looking at, or rather, this is what we don't want to be looking at, right? We don't want to be looking at this in our environment ever, right? So we are going to be looking at steps that we can take to avoid this from happening in our environments. So this is, of course, typical how a typical affected screen would look like. So this was, of course, the WannaCry ransomware, and I just thought of starting by giving this screenshot because this is absolutely terrifying, right? You have the message that says, "Oops, your files have been encrypted." It asks for a ransom, and on the left-hand side, you can see a timer that actually counts down before destroying the data forever, right? So we don't want this to happen. And the first thing we're going to do to fighting against ransomware is actually understanding how ransomware works. And what better way to start than by looking at the evolution of ransomware, right? So ransomware itself came about in the year 1989, or that's when the first round of attacks that were officially called ransomware is thought to have come about. And back then, it was a bit of a failure, right? In the sense that no one really was concerned about it. Ransomware wasn't even a thing back then. It was, of course, at a very primitive stage back then, and ransomware strains had very basic encryption techniques. And also back then, you have to understand that networks weren't connected the way they are today, right? You had today's World Wide Web, and today's networking is completely different from how it was 30 years ago in 1989. So ransomware wasn't really able to propagate across the world like it can today, right? But things started to change in the 2000s with the dot-com bubble and the worldwide internet access, right? Because this made ransomware more powerful as it could target more systems across the globe and inevitably end up hitting something of value, right? So after that, the 2010s, which is where we are now, with Bitcoin, I'm sure Bitcoin is something that's been in the news a lot lately, and Bitcoin has actually resulted in ransomware becoming a much bigger threat in this decade because Bitcoin has so many advantages for hackers and for criminals because Bitcoin cannot be tracked. It gives them anonymity, and it allows them to carry out attacks and get away with it, right? So because of Bitcoin, in the early 2010s, ransomware started developing even more because attackers came up with stronger encryption techniques, and ransomware itself went to the point where in around 2012 and 2013, you started seeing ransomware as a service, right? Just like software as a service, like we have SaaS, people started ransomware as a service, which was available for cyber criminals looking to carry out attacks. And that brought us to 2017, where we had a whole bunch of ransomware attacks across the globe. We had WannaCry, we had Petya, NotPetya, Locky, Zepto, different strains of all of these hitting enterprises all across the globe. And the strains that we see today have become so clever, right? Aside from the fact that ransomware is something that's evil, you got to say that ransomware has become really smart and clever today. In fact, last year, I think in June it was, when a strain of Petya started to proliferate across the globe. So Petya could actually figure out the list of IP addresses in your network that it can spread to, and it could use techniques to obtain the credentials from those machines, trying to access Windows Credential Manager and things like that. And that is absolutely horrifying, right? Because that's the biggest problem of ransomware today, that it can spread really fast across your network and potentially infect um, all of your files and all of your shares, right? This has become the biggest problem, that ransomware is not something that just goes and affects one particular system. It can potentially spread across your network and take out all your data stored in your files and stored in your shares, databases, everything. So this this is a good enough reason why hackers would want ransomware more. I mean, send out more ransomware attacks across the globe. But there's an other added benefit that we talked about, right? Bitcoin. Because what you see in the last point in this slide, These are the reasons why hackers or attackers rather uh, prefer to use ransomware today, because they can easily launch an attack across the globe. So you have a large number of potential victims. Data is something that all of us care about. Data is the reason why all of you are here today. Security of data is the most important thing in IT today. So if someone's data gets encrypted, there's a good chance they will shell out the ransom because they need their data. They cannot be without it. So there's a high chance that people will pay the ransom, making it again all the more attractive and lucrative for attackers. There's of course a low risk of getting caught, which we keep coming back to because of Bitcoin, and there isn't much of effort required for the attackers because you have ransomware as a service. Can you believe this? You actually have ransomware starter kits of sorts, where cyber criminals can purchase these in order to carry out attacks. On one end, here at Manage Engine, we're trying to provide good security solutions. And then you have people also manufacturing and selling attacks, manufacturing and selling attack services. So all of these reasons is why you have to be really, really concerned about ransomware today. And I'm sure most of you are because you're attending this webinar on ransomware. But I saw this incredible stat from Kaspersky that said that a business is hit every 40 seconds by ransomware, right? Every 40 seconds, a business gets hit by ransomware, and the ransom that is being demanded is also increasing. So just think about it. I'm not great at math, but over the course of this 40-minute webinar, so many more businesses across the globe could be infected by ransomware. And now you can hope that it doesn't happen to you, but um, you have to be prepared, because all of these attacks, you keep hearing about them in security forums and in blogs. Always think that this could happen, hey, this could happen to me, and then take steps to prevent that from happening. So let's look at the attack pattern, right? This is a good way to start in preparing your defense mechanisms for ransomware. So attacks typically start with phishing, right? Just like most cyber attacks, phishing is how most things start, because no matter what, no matter whether you are a tech company or a bank or a government agency, there is always an employee in your enterprise who would click unauthorized attachments and click suspicious attachments, right? You just can't help it. There are going to be people everywhere who are going to look at an email and not realize that it's a suspicious email and call their IT or security team, but they're going to go ahead and download and execute that file, even if their computer says this program might be malicious, right? I'm sure all of you have this headache every day that you're always scared. Obviously, maybe you or I, because we are in security, we're a little bit more watchful, but the truth is, most people aren't. So that is why most attacks, cyber attacks, including ransomware, start off with phishing, and then the malware gets downloaded to the system and the payload executes, and this happens automatically in most of the newer strains of ransomware, and it immediately starts encrypting data on the system. And then, of course, when you try to access the data, you see the screen, the dreaded screen that I showed you at the start of the presentation. You see that dreaded screen that says, pay this ransom before a particular deadline, after which your files will be encrypted. Otherwise, your files would be encrypted forever. So you see that ransom note on your screen, and it doesn't stop there. The malware itself spreads across your network, right? The trick with today's ransomware is that it's not just malware. It's sort of like it has this dual nature. It's malware plus worm. So not only does it encrypt data on that system, but then it also can propagate across your network and encrypt data, just so quickly encrypt all your files, your shares, and databases and everything. So this is how the attack takes place. This is how a typical attack pattern of ransomware would look like. So start thinking about, at each point, is there something that we can do to stop the attack? At each point, at the phishing stage, at the when the data encryption starts, when you see the ransom, and when the spreading happens. Right? I'm going to, of course, show you a solution to the problem, but keep this in mind. Now that you know the attack pattern, think about what measures you can have over the course of the ransomware attack, or attack duration. Although it's pretty fast, so it's not like you have much time. Think about at each stage, what do you think would be a good measure to curb the attack at that stage, right? So if you have any ideas, please feel free to share them on the live chat and we can engage in a discussion there as well. But of course, I will be showing you more details about measures that you can implement over the next few slides. So this is the attack pattern. Now, how do we approach the problem? Right? How do we approach it? We know ransomware is there. It's here to stay. It's probably we're going to have more ransomware, more sophisticated ransomware in 2018. We are all concerned about it at this point. So let us look at how we can actually approach the problem and how we can boost our defenses against ransomware, right? So just like most cyber attacks, I say most cyber attacks you can stop by following these three guidelines, right? So you have to first look at reducing the chances of actually being hit by an attack, right? That is ideal. You just want to ensure that no attack happens, everything is sealed, all the vulnerabilities are fixed, you're following all the best practices, and nothing is going to happen. Everything is just perfectly fine. You can sit in your place all through the week and not worry about anything. You have to take as many steps possible to reduce the chance of being hit by an attack, right? Of course, not all attacks can be prevented, right? Despite best efforts, there could be some loophole somewhere that results in an attack. All the more so in the case of ransomware, where, like I said, even if one user on your network is naive and ends up downloading ransomware onto his system, it can potentially spread across your network and affect people who are actually careful with checking their email attachments. So because of that, you can't just rely on fixing vulnerabilities and reducing the odds of being hit by an attack. You have to turn your focus now to detecting and responding to an incident, right? You think about this. Just tell yourself that no matter all the best practices that I implement and the measures that I implement, the attack is still going to happen. Now think about what you're going to do in case the attack happens in your enterprise. So here we have to focus on detecting ransomware activity and then trying to mitigate the attack and sort of conduct damage control and prevent the proliferation across the network, right? Because here's a very important idea that you must know about cyber attacks, which is that as an attack moves through your network, or as an attacker even moves through your network, there is no way they can escape from being noticed, right? This is a fact. It might seem like an outrageous thing to say, but it's true. Yes, there are ways by which they can make themselves more discreet and and try not to get caught. But any attack on your network is being recorded, and you can actually detect activity because attackers will make noise at different points. So you have to focus on tracking activity that is going on in your network and identify possible ransomware activity. Here is where the idea of auditing your log data and auditing events in your network comes into the picture. And we will be looking at more into this because this is very important in today's cybersecurity. Because attacks, I keep saying this, that yes, you can take measures and best practices for reducing the chance of being hit by an attack. But at the end of the day, you also have to be prepared for detecting and responding to an attack, right? And the third thing is preparing for the worst, meaning despite best efforts, you haven't even been able to detect the attack. Then what are you going to do? You need backup, right? You need to recover from the attack. So these are the three things that you need to be focusing on: reducing the chance of being hit by an attack by fixing vulnerabilities, focusing on detecting attacks, that is, in detecting an incident and responding to the incident. And you also got to have systems in place for backup and recovery. This is how you should be approaching ransomware, right? This is the only sure shot way of dealing with any cyber attack. These are the three fronts that you need to ensure that you're staying on top of these three fronts, basically. So, best practices. This is the first of the three things that we saw on the previous slide. Best practices. These are important. These are a must no matter what. And for most of these things, I'd argue that you cannot have any excuse for not doing this, because a lot of these are free. You have user education, right? This, like I said, we saw phishing is how everything starts. In fact, not just phishing, but an even more scary thing is that some ransomware files can get installed during a download in the background without the user's knowledge, right? And what this means is, even it doesn't even have to be phishing, but if a user goes to a compromised website, that just visiting the website can be enough to download the ransomware onto their system, right? It doesn't even Users don't even have to click on a link. In some cases, it's enough if they just visit a compromised website. So here, users have to be aware of these threats, right? Because, like I said, if your entire enterprise just comprised of the attendees of today's webinar, you probably don't have to worry, because all of you guys are security pros. You are not going to fall for phishing. You are not going to fall for some scam on a site. You guys are safe. You guys know what you're doing. But do all the people in your organization know that? I hardly think so, right? Does your HR, your marketing, your sales, your product developers? No, they don't realize the importance of security today. So here is where the security teams have to be proactive, and they have to actually go and spread the awareness of these cyber attacks across their enterprise. You have to do this. You can run email campaigns. One of the things that I recommend is running contests within your organization. This might sound silly, but these things are really important, because you want to ensure that all the people in your organization are aware of the cyber threats of going that they might face while they are on the internet, right? Because they don't know these things. So you can try to incentivize them and try to give them maybe prizes, or regularly conduct presentations, send out emails, keep all your users aware of cyber threats, right? I'm sure most of you know this, but I just have to stress on this, because this is the first step in every attack. So imagine how many attacks can be prevented by just having every user in your enterprise aware of cyber attacks, right? So try to make everyone aware of security, and also everyone responsible. It should really be part of the organization's culture, right? An alignment of the business objectives and security must be that. So this is very important. You can do this for free. How great is that? Next, of course, patching vulnerabilities, right? There's no excuse for not doing this, because if you in fact think about it, the eternal glue exploit, which is what WannaCry and Petya used to propagate across a network, Microsoft actually gave a patch for this particular for this particular um, for this particular vulnerability. They gave a patch for this 1 month before the attack happened, right? So 1 month before the attack happened, a patch is available, and yet more than 200,000 systems across the globe were affected by WannaCry. That doesn't make sense. You have a patch, and yet hundreds of thousands of systems worldwide are not running the latest software. So make sure this doesn't happen in your enterprise. Make sure all the patches that are being released by your vendors, whether it's on your operating system, your web servers, everything, ensure that patches, you have a proper process for patching and ensuring that all your systems are running latest software, right? I'm sure again most of you know this, but this is something that sometimes can get neglected because of other seemingly more pressing issues in IT, right? If you feel that this becomes too much of a task, I think that would be a good time to hire one or two more IT engineers to ensure patching is done. You have a proper process in place for patch management, and all your systems are patched and running latest software. Then, of course, email filtering. This is a pretty good technique that you can use because, again, emails are how a lot of these attacks start. So, if you can have email filtering in place, that can help, right? So, you might be doing this, or maybe you might find this expensive. But in any case, the more best practices you can implement, the better. The next one, enforcing least privilege. This is something that you can do for free, right? Organizations always end up providing more privilege rights to their users than what is necessary, right? Why do we do it? Because it's convenient. We do this, we just give more privileges because it's convenient and people don't need to keep raising requests and coming back to us in case they need access to something. However, you need to stop doing this because more privileges that you give away, what if one of those systems gets attacked by ransomware? You don't want malware hitting a system that has privileged access. That is really asking for trouble, giving out privileges for fun. Instead, what you should be doing is looking at having a robust access management process in place so that you can restrict um, accesses that you don't want and ensure that malware that is accessing your systems cannot spread to systems that have privileged access rather. Okay, I think I just probably made that sentence more confusing than it should have been. But the point is, you shouldn't be throwing out privileges and try to give the least amount of privilege possible or just-in-time privilege if that works in your enterprise. That would be great because you don't want bad guys getting hold of systems with privileged access. You should avoid that. The next thing is to block known malicious IP addresses, rather, not just IP addresses. You need to block known malicious IP addresses that are there on the internet. So this can be blocked at the firewall level. You can deploy threat intelligence tools. You can have, if you have a SIM solution in place, you can integrate those with threat feeds so that known bad guys cannot get in, right? Of course, there are going to be more IP addresses coming in every day, which threat feeds might not be able to detect. But for by just using threat feeds, you can eliminate billions of IP addresses that are known to be malicious. So that will check off a whole bunch of bad guys. Yes, a small percentage of bad guys will remain, but most bad guys can be checked off if you're actually blocking malicious IP addresses at the firewall level. The final point is do not pay the hackers, right? This might seem strange, but you shouldn't be paying the hackers if you get hit by ransomware. Because the more we all pay hackers, the more will they be tempted to carry out attacks, right? So we so if we all start paying hackers, hackers are just going to be like, okay, people are willing to pay for people care about their data and they're willing to pay if we carry out these attacks. They're going to carry out more attacks. And not only that, there is no guarantee, no security expert has actually said for with certainty that if you pay ransom, your data will get encrypted, right? Because when they have you at ransom, they literally own your data. They can decide whether they want to decrypt. You can pay Bitcoin and still have your data encrypted. So you should not pay the hackers at any cost. And the only way to achieve this is by following the best practice, which is backup, right? This is the only sure shot way of not paying the hackers. Backup. It's as simple as that. If you are regularly backing up your critical files and folders, you don't have to pay ransom in case you get infected. All you need to do then is restore your backed up data and literally ask the attackers to go to hell, because we don't want to pay the bad guys and give them what they want. Instead, if you can invest the same amount of money, a lot lesser actually, on a reliable backup and recovery tool, imagine how great that would be, that you can actually tell the attackers to go to hell, and you can worry about you don't have to worry about anything. You just have to simply restore your critical data and just discard the malware from your network. This is the number one best practice, which is why I call it the best practice. Back up your data. No excuses for not doing it. It's as simple as that. Make sure you have backup processes in place. If you don't by now, make this priority, right? This is the only industry-wide accepted best practice for ransomware. Back up your data. Right. So, despite all of these best practices, like I said, attacks can still happen, right? Attacks can still happen. No matter what, you have to be prepared that right now an attack could happen to your enterprise. So, you should ensure that you have an incident detection and response mechanism in place in your enterprise, so that you can ensure you don't just have to rely on best practices, right? Your defenses have to be so strong that even if all the best practices fail you, you still should be in a position to detect and respond to an incident. You can't say, "Oh, I tried, but we got attacked." That doesn't make sense. You can actually set up auditing in your environment so that you have a clear cut incident detection and response mechanism, right? So what is the one thing that we all know about ransomware? What is the one thing that all ransomware has in common? Encryption, right? All ransomware is going to encrypt data. That's what the attack is all about. So you can track your files and folders in your environment. You can track modifications being made to them, the files that are getting renamed, and the files that are getting encrypted, right? You know that ransomware is going to do these things. So why not track these things? If it doesn't happen, great. It's fantastic. But if it does happen, if you're tracking these things, you can detect ransomware immediately, right? You can get alerts to detect ransomware. So if you have several files being encrypted or modified or renamed within a short time, like within a minute, that is not normal activity. That could mean that ransomware is getting launched in your environment. So you need to set up auditing so that you get alerts to detect ransomware as soon as it gets launched in any one of your systems. So this is a must. The solution that we are looking for is quick incident detection and response. So what this means is you need to have auditing set up in your environment so that you are continuously tracking all your files and folders, and in this way you can detect potential ransomware activity. So once you detect it, you got to respond to ransomware. So what you need to be looking at is having a system in place that detects ransomware, and upon the detection of ransomware, within that 1 minute, like within a minute, you're going to have a whole bunch of files and folders getting modified. As soon as your system detects ransomware, you want to shut down that particular infected system, right? That system has to get shut down. And then what you can do is once it's shut down, that's it. The attack cannot spread. So what you can do is then quarantine the affected system, clean it up, remove the infection, and then using your backup tool, you can recover the data and then put it back on the network, right? That way, you are safeguarding your data and you're not paying the hackers. You're good to go. This is the dream. This is what you need in your environment. So you need to be in a position to detect ransomware by tracking file folder accesses and file folder activity. And once you detect the ransomware, you want to shut down that system, quarantine the system, use your backup solution to recover the data, put the system back on the network, and you're good to go. This is what you need. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you now how you can use our Manage Engine tool, File Audit Plus, to automate this threat response. How great is that? Because this is desirable for all of us here. We want to detect ransomware. We want to shut down the system when we detect ransomware so that then we can quarantine the system, recover the data, and put it back onto the network. This is what we want to be doing. This is what all of you want, I'm sure. So here is where we have a solution at Manage Engine called File Audit Plus. And as the name indicates, it's a Windows file server auditing tool. And what you can do with File Audit Plus is you can track activity on your files and folders in real time. And that's the key, because ransomware is not something it's not a slow moving attack. Ransomware is something that finishes encryption. It can encrypt hundreds of GB of data very easily. Think about how big that is. So if you don't detect ransomware in real time, and say you just detected 3 or 4 hours after it has affected a system, it could have potentially gone on to spread across your network, taking out hundreds of GB of data in just a matter of a few hours. So encryption is very fast with ransomware. So we need a real-time auditing solution, which is what File Audit Plus is. And File Audit Plus can track ransomware activity. And as soon as it detects ransomware, not only can it shoot out an alert to you, but it can also automate the threat response by shutting down the system. So you would have received an alert, the affected system would have got shut down, and then all you need to do is then remove the malware from the system after quarantining it, and then put it back on your network. So let me just jump into the product. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to the product UI. So this is the configurations tab, the alert configuration tab of File Audit Plus, where you can set up an alert for ransomware, right? So we don't have that much time to walk you through an entire process. It would just take a few minutes, but I also want to leave some time in the webinar for answering questions on the live chat. But I'm going to show you here on the alert configuration page. If you look at this option that says action, you can choose the actions for, let me just log in again. The session must have expired. So I'm going to show you how you can set up an alert using File Audit Plus to detect and shut down ransomware in your environment, right? So what we'll be looking at is getting alerts for when known ransomware encryption formats get detected, and also a more generic alert for several modifications occurring within a short time interval. So if you look at the actions section here, you can see different actions for which you can receive alerts. You have more routine things like creations and modifications and deletions, which are also important. We're not concerned about that in today's webinar for ransomware. But what we are concerned about is file extension changes, right? If I click on this and click add, and if I, what this means is when files, when the extension of files change, which is what ransomware also does, you will actually be able to uh, get an alert for this. And there's a threshold limit that you can set here. So if you say 100 events occurring within 1 minute, if you have 100 file extension changes happening within 1 minute, that's bad. That could be ransomware. You can get an alert for this. Not only that, this is of course a more generic alert, but let's say we're looking at not only file extension changes, but also file modifications, file creations, files being renamed, all of these things. So when you have these actions happening, say more than 100 times within 1 minute, you can get an alert for this. This is your generic ransomware alert where you are detecting possible, if this happens, the odds are that it is a ransomware attack. So you can set up an alert for this in real time. The alert is going to be in real time. So you can set up an alert for several file modifications happening within a short period of time. Not only that, but you can also monitor certain file types. You see an option here that says file types. You can actually go and choose. You see an option that says ransomware encrypted files. So these are all known ransomware formats. You have Zepto, Locky, Crypt, Test. You have a whole bunch of things here. So you can get alerts when any of these known ransomware encryption formats gets created in your environment. So you know these things are bad, all of these ransomware file formats that you see on the screen, you know these things are bad. So anytime any of these files, even if one file gets created, you can set up an alert so that you are notified that this ransomware encrypted file just got created in your environment. Not only can you get an alert, but you can execute a command. And this is where I said you can automate threat response. You can execute a command to shut down the infected system. You don't even have to worry about typing out something here because File Audit Plus comes in with a built-in script for this. So in your installation folder, you have a script to shut down the ransomware infected system. So you simply have to point to that path in this execute command field. And when any ransomware attack gets detected on your environment, that system will get immediately shut down. So we have you can create a generic alert for several modifications occurring within 1 minute, and the system would get shut down for that. And you can also create an alert for the known ransomware encrypted formats so that if any of those files get created in your environment, Fire Audit Plus will detect it in real time and shut down the system. So in addition to all of this, you can also add a new file type. So if today a new ransomware attack was discovered and we found out that, I'm just saying as an example, it encrypts your files with .sid, you can then create an alert so that you can detect the creation of a .sid file, and you can again automate threat response so that if this new ransomware file gets created in your environment, that system will get automatically shut down, right? How great is that? And it's very easy to set up these alerts. I'm sure you might like a little bit of a longer demonstration of the product, because just to get an idea of how it will work in your environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple of resources on the live chat. I also just wanted to let you know at this point that we will be sending a ransomware white paper and the recording of this webinar as a follow-up email in a couple of days. So you will be receiving the slide deck, the video, and a white paper on ransomware within a day. But in addition to that, I'm just going to point you to a couple of resources. One is what you see on the screen. Which is the File Audit Plus website. So you can visit this website and learn more about File Audit Plus and what it can do, how it can help you detect and defeat ransomware. So I'm just going to send this on the live chat. So you can visit this website and access a whole bunch of pages and resources to learn about what our real-time Windows file server auditing software can do for you. I'm also going to link you a demo request form. So if any of you would like to see a quick 10 to 15 minutes web-based demo with one of our product experts, you can schedule a web-based demo by simply dropping in your name and email ID and a convenient date and time for the call. So I'm just going to send in that as well. So you have received two links on the live chat. One is the File Audit Plus website where you can go ahead and explore the product and learn by yourself. Or I would recommend doing the latter, because what better way to learn about a product than actually seeing it in action and seeing it in your environment. So you can even download the product on the website. It's a free download for 30 days. So you can download a trial version and see how it can work in your environment. It's very easy to deploy. You'd need hardly a few minutes to actually download and deploy the product, and just it's not going to take you too much time to configure your file servers and things like that. So you can schedule a personalized demo on the link that I've sent on the live chat. So in case you have any more queries, you can continue to keep asking them on the live chat today, or if you want to take it up for another day with one of our product experts, you can very well do so by requesting a free personalized demo. So that brings me to the end of the presentation. I hope this session was informative. I hope you got what you were looking for. In case you have any more further queries about File Audit Plus, do keep them coming on the live chat. We're answering them, or of course, go ahead and schedule the demo on the link that I've sent. So once again, thank you so much for joining us today and making this event a success. Um, if you have any more questions, you can also write to us at support@fileauditplus.com. Do take a moment at the end of the webinar to fill up the feedback form to let us know what you liked or didn't like about the session, and keep the questions coming on the live chat as well. And so that's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day ahead.